I kind of wanted to talk today about a little bit about masks and really kind of how it's really the part of the iceberg that's above the surface, and there's a bigger underlying problem that's going on, and masks are just kind of a part of that. So I think we're going to dig into that and have a nice little discussion about it. All right, I hope my intro did okay. We'll see how that panned out. So let me just kind of start off with where I stand on the whole masking thing. Um, there's kind of conflicting evidence out there between people who say we should mask and people who say we shouldn't mask, and there's studies that kind of push both sides of this. And the CDC currently says, yes, you should be masking up, especially if you're going to be in large groups, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's other evidence that actually kind of goes against that, which I kind of want to talk about today. And I want to kind of give you a balanced perspective on this, because I think that my perspective is a balanced one. I don't think that I try to stay pretty much in the middle on almost all of these things. I try to find the middle road because I think truth is almost always somewhere in the middle. It's very rarely one-sided. One political opinion is the right one, and it is actually fully scientifically based. There just isn't really that. That doesn't really happen very often. Or at least between the two sides that are currently there. There might be a third side somewhere that is like, no, this is the real science, and the science is actually kind of in the middle. And, I think that we just don't really know if this is really the right solution. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm saying don't mask, because I think that there are times where it makes sense to wear a mask. And then there are times where it doesn't make sense to wear a mask. Like, for example, if you are driving your vehicle, you have all your windows up, and, your air is not cycling from the outside, you're pretty much in your own little isolation unit right now. Why do you need a mask? I mean, some people may feel more comfortable with a mask. Maybe they're trying to send a message to everybody else to mask up. And I think that's kind of the problem that I'm kind of going to allude to a little bit later on in this video. The problem, as far as I can tell, all of the evidence that we had leading up all the way until about April, like all the way up until April, every single scientific community around the idea of masking, the CDC, the WHO, study after study was saying, people do not know how to properly wear a mask. Therefore, it is actually more detrimental for people to mask up unless they actually know what they're doing. And this is pretty obvious. I mean, there's nurses and doctors have to go through, for medical practice, they actually have to go through a class just for this particular topic of how do you use the protective gear, including masks, right? How do you put it on properly? How do you take care of the masks? How do you, ensure that there isn't some sort of virus or germs that are accumulating on the mask, and the way that you handle it causes that to happen. Because the problem is, when you have a lot of, and again, first I want to say, I am not a scientist. I don't purport to be. I'm not purporting to know everything about this topic. I really don't, okay? But I think I'm pretty well clued in on reason and how to think things through and look at the evidence and try to make a decision based upon that. That's what I try to do for as many things as I possibly can. And when I see that we have, when we see that up until April, everybody's saying, unless you're a healthcare professional or you're in direct contact with somebody who is contagious, you really shouldn't be wearing a mask, right? For a couple of different reasons. Number one, those masks that are effective, those really need to be relegated to the people who actually need them. And, kind of like the toilet paper situation, if we all jump on getting masks, we're going to run out of those masks when people actually need them. And that's going to be one problem. Another problem is, again, the fact that we can actually have a higher viral load on the masks themselves because of improper handling. And when you get those higher loads, you have a higher probability of actually contracting the virus. So, like, there's reasons, there's actual scientific basis and actual scientific reason why they were saying don't mask up. And before COVID 19, this was the general knowledge. This was what everybody pushed is unless you know you need to wear one, you shouldn't be wearing one. Because chances are you probably don't know how to use it in the first place. And if you do use it incorrectly, you're actually increasing your chances of getting any sort of virus. So why is it that all of a sudden, like around the end of April, mid-April, everything changed? All of a sudden, now we all need to mask up. Everybody needs to wear a mask. And by the way, it's not even about which kind of mask you wear. You just need to wear one. Like, all of a sudden, this just went out the window. All thinking, all brain functions ceased to happen. And the politics began to take over. Now, look, I want to be very clear about something. If you want to wear a mask because you think that it protects you, if you feel more protective in that environment, you go ahead and do that. You go right ahead and do that. And I would go so far as to say, if you are a business that you feel like your population, that your customer base would feel more comfortable in your place of business wearing a mask, and you want to make that a part of how you do businesses, in order for you to enter these doors, you need to have a mask. If you want that to be the case, then by all means go ahead and do that. And I don't even care if the state representatives, the governments, etc., if the governors or mayors or whoever else in politics says, we believe that masking up is the right thing to do. Here is the science and the reason behind it. Here's the studies. And this is why we suggest it. And I am fine with that, as long as it's a suggestion, as long as it's not a mandate, because this is, in America, we have this thing where we try to have freedom and independence, and being told that you have to do something is mandated by the government is precisely the opposite of what we typically consider an American value. So just knowing that the perspective of certain people in power to leverage their power in those positions to say that you must do it, that it's not a public health issue. They portray it as a public health issue, but what they're really doing is they're exerting power over you, and that's the main problem. I don't mind a mask suggestion. I don't mind posters everywhere. I don't mind a flooded marketing campaign of saying do this. By all means, I don't care. Do that. If that's what you think that we should all be doing, then that's what you should be doing. But please do not violate our rights to do our own behaviors. This would be akin to or similar to making it illegal to smoke, right? Which they've done a lot of that kind of thing. They've really, really pushed the limits of whether or not you can smoke. Now, I'm not a smoker. I don't smoke. I never have. I have family members that have. I have a pretty significant history of other people around me smoking. And yeah, it's bothersome. I don't like to necessarily be around it. But the problem is telling somebody that they cannot perform a behavior, they cannot do a behavior that doesn't harm anybody else, right? It's just me. It's just all by myself. I'm not harming anybody else by doing this. When you do that, when you mandate that somebody do something for their own good, that is when you have government overreach. And this is where I think that there's some lines there that are being blurred a little bit, because they're saying, well, you don't know if you're symptomatic, therefore you should be covered up, because if you're asymptomatic but you have the virus, you should go and wear one of these. Okay, I understand that, and you're doing that because if I don't do this behavior, right, the idea is if I don't do this behavior of wearing a mask, then I could be adversely affecting third parties, right? I could be infecting somebody else and not even know it. So that's the reason why we do it, is because it does affect a third party. The problem is the science doesn't necessarily back that up either. There have been some small hints, some very few rare cases where certain people have gotten an infection even though they are asymptomatic. Like, I don't think that there's any disagreement with the fact that there have been instances where people who are asymptomatic do transfer the disease. But the question remains, how did that happen? Was that really because they weren't wearing a mask? Because I can almost guarantee you that if I am asymptomatic and I'm wearing a mask, I can still transmit the disease to you. Even if I'm wearing a mask and you're wearing a mask. You know how? Well, let me just see here. Let me just put this right there on that. And then you go and touch that thing. What good did the mask do? Right? And I think that that's the more obvious way that asymptomatic people could possibly transmit the disease is touching things, having the disease on them and then touching things. We know that the virus can be aerosolized, but how does it become aerosolized? The same way every other virus becomes aerosolized, right? Coughing, sneezing, those type of things where, blowing your nose. I understand the whole voice thing, like speaking loudly. I speak loudly. So, by talking a lot really loudly, you aerosolize. Okay, that's the one thing that I think that people are kind of pinning this whole idea of masks upon, is you're talking, not breathing, you're talking is what's going to aerosolize, because that's what actually brings the air from down in your throat. When you're just breathing normally, you're not expelling a whole bunch of these particles, right? It's when you're talking. And if you look at all of everybody who's talking about how we aerosolize this, no one's saying just by breathing. They're saying by talking, by singing, by coughing, by sneezing, right? These expulsion acts, not just simply breathing. So if you're going to say masking is important, but it has nothing to do with the breathing, right? It's not because you're stopping the breathing. You're stopping from coughing and sneezing and loud voices. Okay, that I can kind of understand. However, that I don't understand. I do kind of understand the coughing and sneezing. The loud talking, okay, so when we talk, just don't be right in front of somebody like, you typically wouldn't want to do. You don't want to get in people's faces while you're talking because that's rude in the first place, right? They can smell your breath. That's probably not that good. But if you're coughing and sneezing, you are symptomatic. Like, that's literally the definition of symptoms, is you're coughing and sneezing. So how could you be asymptomatic if you're coughing and sneezing? I'm just saying, none of that conversation actually makes sense. And this muddling of terms is just continuously happening. It's really, really bothersome. Okay, so going back to what I think is kind of the underlying problem. And again, if you feel more comfortable wearing a mask because you think that it's going to prevent something, by all means do it. If you don't, then don't. I think that that's perfectly fine. And if you are a healthy individual, there's actually good... look, herd immunity is a thing. And right now, we are avoiding herd immunity. The way that our politics is going right now is in direct avoidance of that which might help us the most. Okay, having healthy individuals, healthy young people interacting with the virus, contracting it, and developing the antibodies, and then not being able to be reinfected is how you create herd immunity. So if you are telling all of the healthy young adults and younger people to mask up and make sure you don't get the virus, you don't develop the herd immunity, right? You don't get it. It takes a lot longer. The virus is going to linger around for much longer, and until eventually everybody kind of comes out of the quarantine. And then once everybody kind of gets back out into the real world, the virus isn't going anywhere. So of course everybody's going to start getting it again, and you're going to have another spike. And that's why in Sweden, you don't really have that, because they never actually shut down. They had a very tiny, tiny little second spike, very tiny, and it was only in total number of cases, not even the number of deaths. It was just the total number of cases. It spiked, and that was it. And it didn't even spike. I had to even call it a spike. I can actually show you. And this is the thing. Let me transition over to my other monitor here. So if we take a look at Sweden, coronavirus. Let's see. Let's do it under, actually, we'll do it under Google. Just why not? Sweden coronavirus. All right, they don't even want to put the stats up very much, it looks like. Can we find, oh wait, here it is, statistics. Okay, so here's the total number of new cases. We take a look at the deaths. It's nothing, right? Like this is herd immunity. If we look at other places like Germany, for example, okay, there's an increase in new cases, and the number of deaths have started to kind of increase as well. But again, you look at Sweden, okay, they've had kind of an increase a little bit also in terms of number of cases, not too bad, but the number of deaths again is pretty much nil, like 1 or 2, like 2 is the highest. Okay, so that's one comparison. Let's try another one. Let's try Italy. Let's see how Italy's doing. Right? They had a huge outbreak, and now they're having a second one. Number of deaths, not even comparable, right? So what the heck is going on? Well, it's called herd immunity, right? It's when you have large populations that get it and contract it and then develop the antibodies, the next time that the virus starts to come around, it doesn't have the same effect on people, okay? It doesn't have the same reach as it did before. So, all right. This is where I started to look around. And the problem that I can see is the science that's being purported out there is always just one way. There's only one direction. Like the narrative is that this is a good thing. That you need to mask up, and any piece of evidence that can be scrapped or found to support that narrative is handed to you every single night. And if you have any countervailing thought about this, you are deemed an anti-science person. But there are people out here that are people of science that are like, this is crap. And it didn't take me long. I just had to look up. I just had to go try to find, just do a quick, hey, masks not working, or masks don't work. Just try searching for that and try to find it as best as you can. Try to find an impartial person, or try to find a person of science, a doctor, somebody that is not just some, right-wing outlet of news or something like that, right? We're not going to Fox News or something somewhere there. That might be your starting journey to go find the actual research. But look for the research. Look for what they're actually saying. And here we have this guy, D.G. Rancourt. And I just want to show you who this is. This is a person from Ontario Civil Liberties Association who has 146 publications, 4,331 citations, works for the Ontario Civil Liberties Association, worked at the University of Ottawa in the Department of Physics, worked at Leiden University at their laboratory there, University of Toronto under physics, University of Ottawa for physics. So, okay, physics may not necessarily be the exact same as an epidemiologist or something like that, but it's a scientist, somebody who looks at the information and tries to think critically in terms of a scientific position. And this is just one of the first ones that I found. I'm sure that if I wanted to continue searching, I could find hundreds of these. So what does D.G. Rancourt say? Here's the abstract of his article here, and I'll if I could remember to, I'll post the link of where you can find this. But you can just probably search this right here: face masks, lies, damn lies, and public health officials. A growing body of evidence. Okay. So, a vile new mantra is on the lips of every public health official and politician in the global campaign to force universal masking on the general public. Quote, there is a growing body of evidence. This propagandistic phrase is a vector designed to achieve 5 main goals. And I want you to listen to these goals. 1. Give the false impression that a balance of evidence now proves that masks reduce the transmission of COVID-19. 2. Falsely assimilate commentary made in scientific venues with evidence. 3. Hide the fact that a decade's worth of policy-grade evidence proves the opposite, that masks are ineffective with viral respiratory diseases. Okay? And number 5, hide the fact that there is now direct observational proof that cloth masks do not prevent exhalation of clouds of suspended aerosol particles above, below, and through the masks. Okay? Those are his 5 points, and there's more. We'll go into each one of these a little bit later on here too, but deter attention away from the considerable known harms and risks due to face masks applied to entire populations. The said harms and risks include that a cloth mask becomes a culture medium for a large variety of bacterial pathogens and a collector of viral pathogens. Given the hot and humid environment and the constant source where home fabrics are hydrophilic. I haven't seen that word in forever. Hydrophilic. Whereas medical masks are hydrophobic. In short, I argue, op-eds are not evidence. Op-eds are not evidence. Irrelevance does not help, and more bias does not remove bias. Their mantra of a growing body of evidence is a self-serving contrivance that impedes good science and threatens public policy. Oh my gosh, does this guy nail it on the head or what? Like, again, I don't mind people wearing masks as long as they're the right masks and they're worn correctly. And they're done for the right reasons, right? Like, if you are around people who are susceptible to they're at-risk people. If I go to see my grandma, yes, I'm going to be wearing a mask. As a matter of fact, I've got an N95 mask. Actually, that's probably not the one that I'm going to use because that one is actually not as good because you're expelling. So if I was infected, I would be expelling it out anyway. So maybe I'll have to find I'll probably actually use a surgical mask if I do see her. I'm actually just basically isolating and not seeing her. I've talked to her on the phone. That's it. Okay, so their mantra of growing body. Okay, so that's the other thing. Their mantra of a growing body of evidence is self-serving contrivance. That's because the body of evidence is them just repeating what they say to each other. Like if I just write 5 articles that all say that the same thing, that's now 5 pieces of evidence according to them. No, it's not. That's not evidence. That's just an op-ed. That's your opinion. And trust me, I get it that there are some studies out there that say that, masking is effective, but in a very controlled environment. And that's the thing is the problem that we have is that how many people do you trust that every single person you see and interact with that is wearing a mask, do you believe that they are properly wearing a mask and that mask is the appropriate kind of mask? Right? Like, how many people, what percentage would you put on the population of people that are wearing masks have A, done it properly, are handling the mask properly, and B, are using the correct mask for the situation? The chances of that I'm giving it 99.5% are not doing it correctly. Right? That's just, even me, I don't really handle my masks properly. I know that I don't, but again, that's because I don't really care all that much. It's not really my thing. I just wear it because I kind of have to. That the state mandates that I wear one, so I have to wear one. I could give a rat's patootie. In fact, if I get the virus, God forbid, well, I shouldn't say God forbid. If I get the virus, I think I'm pretty healthy. I think I could probably stand just fine. And the simple fact is, I'm probably going to get it. I think most of us are going to get it through several generations of this. Just like the flu or the cold, it goes around, it's seasonal, it's going to continue to propagate. And so we just need to develop the antibodies to fight it off when we get those infections. And the only way you could do that is to actually get the infection. And we sort of do that through, I mean, that's basically the idea of vaccinations, is they give you kind of this weakened, non-effective version of the virus so that your body, your antibodies can identify it and adapt. Okay, so like this is, again, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I just try to be a reasonable person. And what I'm reading here, this seems like a reasonable thing. And I'm reading it from somebody who I respect their profession. They're a physics professor, right? Or I shouldn't say, I don't think he's been a physics professor. I think he was a physics professor, I believe. Yeah. So for the Department of Physics in Ottawa. Okay. So for a very, very long time, that's 22 years, right? 22 years. And then ever since, so he's been working with the Ontario Civil Liberties Association as a researcher, okay? And again, just using scientific deduction. That's really all it is, just reason and scientific deduction, which I think of science as reason, as basically the quintessential reasoning strategy. Like it's a heuristic for reason. That's really what science is. It's a heuristic for reason. So, okay. Going back to what he says, because I think there's some really great stuff in here. This is really basically a synopsis of everything he said. In short, I argue op-eds are not evidence, irrelevance does not help, and more bias does not remove bias. Right? More bias does not remove bias. Their mantra of a growing body of evidence is self-serving contrivance that impedes good science and threatens public safety. I prove that there is no policy-grade evidence to support forced masks on the general population, and that all the latest decades' policy-grade evidence points to the opposite, not recommending forced masks of the general population. Right? So the opposite is what he says the evidence supports, is that you shouldn't have this globalized, everybody should wear one. Therefore, the politicians and health authorities are acting without legitimacy and recklessly. The article is organized into following sections. Summary, introduction, competence to talk about face masks and COVID. Government responses have been a public health and safety catastrophe. The growing body of evidence mantra needs to stop. And so what actually is the growing body of evidence? I'm going to skip down to that last part because I think we all pretty much know what he's going to be saying in this. And again, if you want to look it up, you certainly can. I'll probably provide a link to it because I think that's important. All right, where are we going to find? So here we go. So what actually is the growing body of evidence? Given the above documented contradiction between the claimed growing body of evidence and the actual, all RCTs say the opposite of what is claimed. One can reasonably ask, what are Ontario public health officers thinking of when they assert there is a growing body of emerging evidence that shows that non-medical masks can help prevent the spread of COVID-19? One answer comes from the Simcoe Muskoka District Health Unit from Ontario, Canada, webpage entitled Frequently Asked Questions Wearing a Face Covering in Indoor Public Spaces. Updated July 24th of this year. The latter webpage has this section. What is the evidence that supports the use of masks? There is a growing body of scientific evidence that indicates the widespread use of face coverings by all persons decreases the spread of respiratory droplets. Public health experts also support the widespread use of face coverings to decrease transmission of COVID-19. At this link, you will find a collection of expert opinions, and studies on face coverings. Now, that might be a little bit more helpful, studies. The list is for informational purposes only and is not representative of all articles. Oh, they even include a caveat here, okay? This list is for informational purposes only and is not representative of all articles and studies available on the subject. So you mean that there is also another opinion on this? There is other scientific studies on this? Or there are other scientific studies? There's an alternative opinion about this? What? I thought the science was settled. I thought it's a growing evidential body. Nor does this list cover all articles and studies that are reviewed by our staff and medical officer of health. The said link is a webpage to the Wellington Dufferin Guelph Public Health Unit entitled Your Health COVID-19, etc., etc. The latter webpage has a section entitled Expert Opinions, having 8 entries, and section entitled Evidence and Studies on Face Coverings, having 30 entries. The 8 so-called expert opinions are merely op-ed type commentaries, not providing any new data, evidence, or perspectives. These do not constitute a growing body of emerging evidence, nor do they add any evidence whatsoever. That's right. An opinion is not evidence. An opinion is not a study. If I pulled 10 scientists and to tell me their opinion on which dog breed is the best dog breed, does that mean that it is now a scientific study on which dog breed is the best? No, it's opinion. It's not factually based. Just because somebody says something doesn't mean it's actually factually true. Even if they have an MD next to their name or a PhD next to their name, that does not make the opinion science. It does not make the opinion fact. Nor is my opinion fact. I don't claim to have a fact, okay? I don't claim that my opinion is fact. I just try to cite the facts and then say, this is my opinion based upon the facts. The 30 so-called evidence and studies can be described as follows, numbering them ES1 through ES30 in the order given, alphabetical order first of the author. None of these studies are RCTs, irrespectively of whether any outcomes infections are verified, lab confirmed or not. Some are actually op-ed style opinions. Some are tentatively modeling studies. Some are population studies. Some are physical mask filtering studies. A few are overview reports. A few purport to be meta-analysis or systematic reviews of old RCT and non-RCT studies. None can be considered additions to a growing body of emerging evidence, at least not usable policy-grade evidence. All are susceptible to large bias. All of them are susceptible to large bias. Okay, and I think he goes through each one of these, and right, he goes through at least several of them, kind of detailing how they don't really match up. So let's just take a look at the first one he's got here. Alberta Health Services COVID-19 Scientific Advisory Group. Rapid Response Report. What is the effectiveness of wearing medical masks, including homemade masks, to reduce the spread of COVID-19 in the community? Updated 2020 of June, right? June of 2020. The first two bullets in the section entitled Key Messages from the Evidence Summary are, as medical masks are often bundled with other IPC interventions and have variable compliance, clinical trials on the effectiveness of medical masks have been challenging. Systematic reviews of randomized controlled trials in healthcare settings have not demonstrated a significant reduction in acute respiratory infections. So literally the study that they cite that says that it supports mask wearing has this statement in it that says controlled trials in healthcare settings have not demonstrated a significant reduction in acute respiratory infections. How is this even possible? The stated opinions are completely contradictory to what is actually in the statement of study. How do you get... I'm sorry, folks, but there's some duping going on. There is some significant duping going on. And it's political. Like I can't think of any other reason why this would be happening other than politics. Right? Like it's just pin me against your neighbor. Now look, again, I will say, I don't care if you wear a mask. You do you. You are your own person. You're responsible for yourself. I'm responsible for myself. And if I am going to be interacting with somebody who I think is at risk to if I think that I've been in contact with somebody who's had it, or if I'm developing symptoms, I am going to isolate myself and not put myself anywhere near somebody who is at risk. And if I'm going to have an interaction with my grandmother, who is in a high-risk category, I probably won't even have an interaction with her at all. But if I absolutely had to, I would make darn sure my hands are completely washed. I have a responsibility to my family, and I would hope that she is also wearing a mask, right? I would make sure that she is doing that as well, right? So there's a personal responsibility there, absolutely. But that's the thing, is it's a personal responsibility. It's not the government's responsibility. Okay, I get what they're trying to do is they're trying to have action, right? We need to demonstrate that we are doing something in this crisis. The doing something in this crisis is giving correct, proper information. And the proper information, all the way up until April of 2020, was don't wear a mask unless you, A, have the appropriate mask, and B, know how to actually handle it, right? Those were the things that we were told for how many decades now, that you should not be doing a mask. You should not wear a mask unless you know which mask you should be wearing and you can handle it properly. All of a sudden, decades worth of science, decades worth of study, decades worth of health official, opinion. I will say that it's opinion. All of that gets thrown out the window for this very narrow, select few months. Why? What event could possibly be going on right now that would influence the way that people discuss what should be essentially a scientifically based discussion? What possible thing could there be? I don't know. Maybe it's an election year. Maybe, politics has a part to play in this. That's the main problem. That's the underlying thing. And the very fact that I'm even putting this video out, I have a sneaky suspicion that because I'm saying, hey, there's a balanced view on this. Some people should wear masks. Some people shouldn't wear masks. The scientific evidence leading up to this all said different, right? And you can go find all the studies that you want that say that masks are a good thing. I bet you're probably going to find the same thing that Dr. Rancourt here found about most of those studies, in that they are pretty significant, highly selective, and pretty biased, and very opinionated instead of actual presentation of scientific evidence. Because we've already done these studies. There are significant amounts of data and studies out there that show that mask wearing is not necessarily always the right thing. And I get that people want to say, well, why do doctors wear masks and everything? I'm not arguing against people who should be wearing masks because they are trained on how to use them and handle them properly. They're trained on which ones to wear. How do you handle it? How do you clean them? How do you dispose of them? How do you, how regularly should you be changing them out? Right? Those kind of things that the doctors and nurses actually know about, that the general population doesn't have a clue and is not doing any of those things, right? They're not doing those things. So where does that leave us? Well, it means that if you have a balanced opinion about it, you will be disqualified immediately, right? Like you are dismissed out of hand. I don't know that this particular video, it doesn't have any sort of monetization to it right now. But if it did, I can guarantee it would have a strike against it. Chances are this video might even be taken down by YouTube, simply because I'm saying, oh, look, there's something else, some countervailing evidence, and somebody has actually done the research, and here it is. Here are their findings. All of that that means that it's disqualified. The WHO and the CDC both cannot agree on whether or not to mask up, but somehow me saying that these two bodies can't agree and that really the middle road is mask if you need to mask, don't mask if you don't need to mask. Like, having that opinion means you're disqualified, you should be kicked out, you should be, you're no longer a reasonable person. You like, the science is settled, you're a science denier. All of these hatred things, nothing but divisive. And that's the thing, is it's all divisive things. I don't, if somebody has the opinion that we should all mask up, like, that's their opinion, we should all mask up. Okay, that's great. I disagree with your opinion. I'm not going to call you a bad person. I just think, the scientific evidence doesn't necessarily support that. But if I say, I don't know that we should all be masking up. The scientific evidence seems to say that that's actually not the right thing. And we've got decades of science that says that we shouldn't be doing those things. By me saying that, I am Hitler incarnate. I am the devil. I need to die. I should, they hope that I contract COVID and die from it. Right? That's the political division. And you can't tell me that it's two-sided. You can't tell me that both sides of this are acting in the same irrational manner. There may be some people on the no mask side that are kind of irrational about it and, teasing and mocking and stuff like that. But that's teasing and mocking. That's not condemning people or telling them to go to hell or saying that they should die, right? There's just this political discourse that's going on right now that is just absolutely atrocious. It needs to stop. We need to have proper conversation and civil conversation. And the fact that people are willing to kick others out or shut people down that have these dissenting opinions is what I think is the underlying real problem, right? The politics has become so divisive that it colors every discussion now. Everything has to be colored through these glasses of politics. You're either for me or against me, right? Every single thing down the line is you're either for me or you're against me. And if you are against me, you're not just wrong, but you are evil. You are hateful. You're spiteful. You're sexist, homophobic, anti-science, blah, 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 blah. And that is a problem. That needs to stop. We've got to stop this. I don't know how we're going to stop it. I don't think it does stop. I think it does stop, but where it stops is a train crash. And that's something I mentioned in an earlier video. I just don't see this ending well. And we're just going faster and faster down this divisive path. And it's sad, it's unfortunate, and it's just continuing. And this is just another piece of it. It's just another piece of it. It's too bad. These things could be easily settled through proper rational discussion and behavior and civil discourse. But that's not what we do in today's society anymore. That we don't do that. That's not allowed. If you have a dissenting opinion, you are not allowed to speak. Your channel will be shut down. Your videos will be removed or at bare minimum demonetized. You'll be chastised endlessly by everybody. And that's not what's supposed to happen. And it shouldn't happen the other way either. And you can really, that's basically what authoritarian regimes do, is they demand that you adhere to their policies. They demand that you adhere to their way of think, their group think. And that's what's going on right now. There is a group think going on, and anybody who dares to dissent from that group think needs to be castigated and set aside and demonized in the public sphere. You should not be allowed. You're grouped in with all of these horrible, awful people. You must be a white supremacist if you don't wear a mask. I mean, that's literally the equation that's being made right now. It's so awful. It's horrendous. It's not doing our society any good. So how do we stop this? How do we stop this train? I think the only way to stop it is to say your piece, to stand up to it, right? To not be afraid of having that that vitriol come at you, like I'm doing right now. To not be afraid and stand firm in front of it for what you think is true, in terms of, it's true that there is dissenting opinion. That doesn't mean I'm right. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It doesn't mean you're right and I'm wrong. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means we have different opinions about it. And you know, when it devolves into one side claiming that the other is hateful, then that's where you have to be willing to stand up and say, I am not the hateful one. You are the hateful one. You're telling me that I am hateful for reasons that are not true, right? You have to be willing to make a stand, because that's the only way you can stop it or slow it down, is if enough of us that are on this train put our feet down and resist against the direction that the train is going. Until we do that, it's not going to stop. It's going to continue speeding up until we all have this big fireball crash at the end, which I feel is approaching closer and closer every day. So, yeah, I don't exactly have the greatest outlook on things right now, unfortunately. Hopefully you guys can cheer me up. Maybe send me a comment, send me something more positive in the comment section. I should probably kick it there. I've already been talking for like 50 minutes now, way too long. I'll try to remember to drop this link in the description of this video so you guys can go check it out if you want to. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later, and hope